Have you ever wondered about the future Sith, meaning after Return of the Jedi in Legends? There are plentiful, but today we're going to talk about what were their thoughts in retrospect. What did they specifically think about Darth Maul? The popular ones are easy. Darth Caedus, for example, was the grandson of Vader, so of course he would have an opinion when learning about history, especially Sith history. What did other Sith think? For example, the Big Daddy himself, Darth Krayt, the one who created the One Sith Order. There's basically a lot of Sith after Sidious and Vader. Immediately afterwards you have Lumia. Within Krayt's organization you also have Darth Maladi, Darth Nihil, and even Darth Warlock. For a moment there's Darth Talon there too, but today I want to focus on the two biggest baddies, and that's Darth Caedus and Darth Krayt. For example, Darth Krayt was actually alive during Maul's emergence as a Sith and during his death. Caedus was born later on. Let's start with Darth Caedus, formerly known of course as Jacen Solo, the son of Han and Leia. This is in Legends. Of course in canon we know that he was replaced by another character, Ben Solo, played by Adam Driver, Kylo Ren. However, in Legends, Jacen was kind of a complex figure whose fall to the dark side was driven by a desire, as always, for order. His transformation into a Sith Lord was marked by willingness to make personal sacrifices in order to achieve what he wanted. One of those sacrifices was of course the killing of his aunt Mara Jade Skywalker. He believed what he was doing was for the greater good. So, in skipping a lot of material, which we can cover when talking about Caedus, you can kind of understand how Caedus's mind functioned. It was very similar to Anakin. Caedus's philosophy centered on the idea that peace could only be achieved through control and that the ends justify the means. However, in contrast with Darth Maul, this is where we have some issues, because after the Phantom Menace, Maul's only path was the one of vengeance and personal ambition. You see, he was trained from a very young age by Sidious, and Maul was just a weapon of destruction. He was driven by hatred and desire for revenge, especially after his defeat on Naboo. So unlike Caedus, Maul lacked a broader vision for the galaxy. He focused instead on personal vendettas. Only during the Clone Wars and Order 66 did he start expanding. But Caedus had a lot of thoughts about that too, because where Caedus wanted order, Maul wanted, well, more chaos. It's pretty simple. From Caedus' perspective, Maul's approach was likely as short-sighted as it was self-destructive. I mean, Caedus believed in the necessity of difficult choices for the greater good, while Darth Maul's actions were driven by personal grievances without really a unifying goal. Even if you make the case that Maul wanted to become the Shadow Lord or the king of all criminal syndicates, it was still a personal ambition. It wasn't to unify the criminals so they can do a better job. Caedus might have viewed Maul's inability to move beyond personal revenge or personal ambitions as a failure to harness the true potential of the dark side. And furthermore, if you look at Caedus' own experiences with the Sith teachings, particularly under the influence of Vergara or Lumia, they emphasize the importance of sacrifice and the rejection of personal attachments for the sake of galactic stability. This is something that Maul never ever achieved. Even with the teachings of Sidious, who was pretty much grandiose, his plans were always to scheme for bigger and better, to control the freaking galaxy, for example. He went through destroying the Jedi Order step by step, meticulously planning Order 66. When you look at Maul, he just clings at past slights from Obi-Wan and whoever, and his inability to let go of personal vendettas would have been just antithetical to Caedus' beliefs, and you can understand that Caedus really didn't agree with his methods. At the end of the day, if you look at it, both Darth Caedus and Darth Maul were powerful Sith Lords in their own way. Their philosophies and motivations, though, were fundamentally different. Caedus, in the end, viewed Maul as just a cautionary tale of what happens when the dark side is wielded without a grand purpose. And of course, since Lumia had her brushes with Vader and then taught Caedus, you can pretty much have an idea that Lumia would not have agreed with Maul, because Maul, well, as we discussed, he was selfish for Lumia's views. But now we come to one of the craziest Sith Lords that you will ever encounter, and that's Darth Krayt. This was a pretty interesting topic for me to cover, because Krayt and Maul are both kind of insane in the membrane. But as you will see, again, he has his difficulties when addressing his thoughts about Darth Maul. So Darth Krayt, of course, was born as Asherad Head, and he was a very old Jedi turned Sith who ultimately forged a new Sith Empire in the distant future after Return of the Jedi. He was revered as the Dragon of the Sith. Krayt survived the Clone Wars, the Jedi Purge, Order 66, and in the end declared himself Dark Lord after Sidious's fall. By the time he rose to power, Krayt had come to see the galaxy as writhing in chaos and disorder, requiring a single strong leader to impose order. You can kind of see where I'm going with this. Again, you see that Krayt hates disorder, hates the chaos that the galaxy is in right now, which goes against what Maul actually wanted to achieve after Order 66. Now, right off the gate, Krayt would have had a problem with Maul because of his Sith dogma at the time, learning from Darth Sidious. You see, Krayt was a kind of a visionary. Thousands and thousands of years later, he finally abolished Darth Bane's rule of 2 and proclaimed his own rule of 1. You can kind of see the problems immediately. Not only was Krayt for order, bringing order to the galaxy and abolishing the chaos and disorder, but he was against the rule of 2, to which Darth Maul was not a fan of by the end, but he was brought up with that dogmatic view of Darth Sidious and the Sith at the time. After Darth Bane, the Sith survived with the rule of 2 for a millennia. From Krayt's perspective, both Maul and Tyrannus and Sidious and even Vader, they were in the wrong. For him, the dark side's purpose was not endless infighting, but unity behind a grand vision. He insisted the Sith should devote themselves towards a common goal rather than personal advancement, giving their quest for power a meaningful purpose. Naturally, similar to Caedus, he was in line with the thinking that Maul was just a renegade and nothing to what he thought was a true Sith. He believed in strict order, strong leadership, and a collective mission for the Sith. He even famously declared himself the man of vision needed to rescue the galaxy. Now, if you look at Darth Maul's career by contrast to Krayt, it is a far darker and more personal tale. He is a Zabrak that was taken as a child by Darth Sidious, and Maul just grew up raised to hate the Jedi. As Sidious's apprentice, Maul became a lethal weapon. He slew Qui-Gon Jinn on Naboo, ultimately defeated by Obi-Wan, and against all odds, he survived for years in hiding. Now, immediately, when he came back in the Clone Wars, he went against the thoughts of Darth Krayt, something that Darth Krayt would take notice, because even being discarded did not give him the mindset of Krayt to become the one true Sith, to abolish these ancient beliefs. Maul still believed that he was a Sith Lord. That's why he went on to take his brother Savage Opress as his own apprentice, insisting that the two of them were the true Sith instead of Sidious and Tyrannus, in the end gaining the attention of Darth Sidious, who journeys to Mandalore just to teach Maul and Savage Opress a lesson. This is where he imprisons Maul and kills Savage Opress. Nobody can dispute the survivalness, the sheer will to live of Darth Maul. He survived being cut in half by Obi-Wan. He came back stronger. He led the Shadow Collective. He forged alliances with criminal syndicates and survived the Republic and the Empire. But the failure comes to a head when he ultimately abandons the Sith mantle. Maul simply turned to the underworld, he founded the Crimson Dawn, and he focused instead on building an empire of his own, the Crimson Dawn. This would give you an indication that Krayt would love this, right? He created his own empire similar to how Krayt did with the one Sith. Again though, it is wrong, because Krayt only wanted order. That's what he focused on. Maul's empire is totally different. He craved chaos. In chaos, he thrived. With his dying breath, Maul's words to Obi-Wan were his desire for revenge, that the Chosen One would finally avenge us. So you can see the philosophical divide. Krayt's doctrine and Maul's life represented nearly opposite poles of Sith philosophy. Darth Krayt insisted that the Sith must serve order, that only a unified, purpose-driven Sith order could bring lasting peace. He engineered his new empire according to that, recruiting scattered Force users into a single cause. In Krayt's words, the galaxy needed to impose order on chaos and unite the galaxy under his rule. Now here's a tidbit that you guys might enjoy. Remember the Darth Maul game that was cancelled just before Lucasfilm sold to Disney? Yeah, that game was called Battle of the Sith Lords, and it actually featured a scene with Darth Maul and Darth Krayt. Here's an interesting fact. Before Disney canonized everything and made the rest Legends. Remember that Darth Maul does not die on Tatooine. In Legends, Darth Maul goes on to live on for more than his canonized death on Tatooine. So in Legends, he actually meets up with Krayt, because after the fall of Sidious and the Empire, Krayt was actually seeking out potential Force sensitives to build an army to bring together a new breed of Sith. Now during his travels, Krayt encounters Darth Maul, who had also been scavenging for Sith holocrons for greater knowledge. Krayt and Maul fought one another for possession of one of the holocrons, but Darth Krayt proved to be superior than Maul. Instead of killing Darth Maul, Krayt offers him a chance to serve the Sith once more. After getting this offer, Maul used this opportunity to bring back what he thought Darth Sidious took from him, and he actually swore his loyalty to Darth Krayt, so essentially becoming his partner more so than his apprentice. And the plan was for Darth Krayt to actually betray Maul, because in the end we know that he planned for the one Sith order. He planned to abolish the rule of two, something that Darth Maul of course was against, because he was brought up to believe that the Sith should adhere to the rule of two. There should be a master and an apprentice. There's something more though. Darth Krayt explicitly rejected the old Sith mantra, power for its own sake. In his own words, he gave the Sith's search for power more purpose and expected only the strongest to carry out the Order's mission. Under Krayt's rule, there were many other Sith. Similar to the Old Republic era, not all of them got along, but they were united under Darth Krayt's banner. Maul shows a hint of this with Savage Opress, but in the end, we all know that Maul had no interest in uniting the Sith under a single grand plan. From Krayt's viewpoint, it is clear that the self-centered bravado adherence to the old master-apprentice power grab would look very misguided. Krayt's own experiments with the ancient Sith, even when he communed with Darth Bane's holocron, had earned scorn because Bane just went at Krayt for breaking the rule of two. He was furious. So it's easy to imagine Krayt judging Maul's two-man setup as equally obsolete and reckless. Krayt sought unity and strength with multiple other Sith that had an alliance. Maul's alliances were completely fragile and built on violence and betrayal, like for example the Shadow Collective. It was nothing more than a band of mercenaries and pirates, so were the other criminal syndicates. In the end, all Sith Lords were kind of historians. They learned from the teaching of others, even if indirectly. And Krayt would note that Maul was driven and charismatic. He assembled a private army and an underworld network almost single-handedly. He also showed a certain consistency in purpose, even if it was just vengeance. This, of course, comes with a certain level of respect in every Sith. The tenacity of Maul alone. I mean, he survived the attack by Palpatine and the hunting down by the Republic. He outlived the Jedi Order, something very few Sith did. Now, Krayt also understood the lack of discipline when it came to Maul. If you read about Krayt, you know that he was very resistant to fear, but Maul was driven by fury and obsession. And because of what Krayt achieved, he achieved to become the one true Sith, to unite all other Siths underneath him. In his eyes, Maul failed to break under Sidious's spell. I mean, in the Clone Wars, Sidious easily subjugated Maul again. He proved that Maul lacked the strategic acumen to usurp his master or outmaneuver greater powers. Of course, Krayt thought that if he was in Maul's position, he would have already succeeded. Now, similar to Caedus and Krayt, we come to a very interesting conclusion. Krayt did see Maul's legacy as a cautionary footnote. Krayt understood that even enemy Jedi like Obi-Wan showed a kind of respect by giving Maul a proper funeral, and that an underworld organization tried to carry on his vision, but would likely dismiss all of those as minor honors. For Krayt, the true measure of a Sith Lord was whether they strengthened the Order and the galaxy. Maul did neither of these. His story is one of complete chaos. It's broken, just like him. There's no start and end to it. It's just discombobulated, and this bothered Darth Krayt to his core. This is why I think, more so than Caedus, Krayt's ideology did really judge Darth Maul harshly. If you would ask Krayt, he would not be empathetic to Darth Maul at all. They had extremely different viewpoints, and because of this, Maul is lucky that he never actually stood toe-to-toe and met up with Darth Krayt at his peak during the One Sith era. This was pretty much what the future Sith thought of Maul, but if you want to know more and are interested in lore videos like this, we have one just for you right now. You can click it on the end screen.